public meeting, Raumati South. I believe it's probably the first one for many years down here. Good to be in the Memorial Hall after having a refit. Those of you who don't know me, my name is V. Larissy. I'm the chair of the Raumati Community Board. Tonight we've got two other board members, Tane Sheeran over here, and Tim, where have we gone Tim? Tim over in the corner there. Before I go any further, I might just invite Karl to open up with Kogia, if you wouldn't mind.
Thanks, Fred. Hello, everybody. E tātua tūwhera mai kia mātou. Te kuaha, te taka pono, te mātou ranga, ama mātou, e whakongi mati, roi e tūre mai tapu.
Thank you. Okay, so I thought it might be useful just to get a little bit of background before we kick in so that people kind of know where we've been and where we're up to in terms of the community board in this process. I'll let the CAP members talk about who they are in the process that they've gone under. From a community board perspective, what I've kind of really wanted to get across is that we don't control the process and we can't tell anyone in council what to do, okay? We can make noise about stuff and that's useful, but the major concern for us with our community board is just making sure that our community gets a place where their voice can be heard. And it's a place that someone's going to listen and we can pass on up the line whatever needs to be passed on behalf of the community, right? Sometimes we actively need to do that, sometimes you guys make your voice loud enough that we don't need to do anything. And that's what we wanted to do tonight. We felt that the sort of pathway that we've had with the CAP panel in the last year with our community board, we've had some really robust meetings. Some of you were at the Raumati Bowling Club last year. We've had a couple of meetings at our community board since then where we've talked about some good, robust discussions. And we wanted to continue with that. We felt that there was some need for some more community input because although those conversations have been great, we haven't had a lot of people at them. So there's a lot of people out in this community that still aren't aware of what's going on and engaging with what's going on. Okay? And if this is meant to be a community-driven process, then our job as a community board is to make sure that we're reaching you as much as we can. So we set up these meetings. These are not council-driven, organised or resourced. They're something that we as a community board have done with our own. So some of you rang council saying, when is this meeting on Tuesday? And they weren't sure. That's because it's not their meeting, it's our meeting. Okay? This is our meeting as a community board for our community. Okay? Other communities aren't doing it. It's only happening in Raumati, and it's because we're doing it. Okay? I encourage the rest of you to do the same. What we want to make sure, I know public meetings have got a bit of a bad rap in certain sectors of community engagement, and that's for one simple reason. People often turn up and shout. Okay? Now, as with our community boards, I understand that people have emotion on these things. There's all sorts of opinions, okay? And some of you will vehemently disagree with each other or with the CAP members. Okay? That's okay, right? As a community board chair, I'm more than welcome, more than comfortable for people to have different views. Okay? Your different views are welcome. Okay? But there's a couple of rules that I insist on. One, they need to be shared respectfully. Okay? And if you do that, then we can have that robust conversation. Okay? So the respect is the key thing. Right? Happy to hear what you've got to say. Sometimes it might be a bit of heat in it, but we need to get through that. Again, if we can't do that, then I will kind of shut the questioning down. Okay? So don't get angry at me. It's just what we need to do so that everyone can kind of participate. In terms of how this is going to run, I'll introduce the CAP panel members in a minute, and they'll talk about who they are. They're going to give you a presentation. This presentation that they give is going to be available electronically. Okay, there's paper copies around, but if anybody wants a copy of the electronic version, we can get that to you after the show. Right? No problem. Once they've done their presentation, we're going to open it up to Q&A. Okay, which of course is opening ourselves to chaos. Let's see where we get to. I'm not going to beat questions. I'm not going to kind of filter who gets to say what and where. But I guess there's a couple of things to keep in mind. One is that the CAP members will outline their purpose tonight in terms of where their presentation is focused. So what we'd really like to do is keep a lot of the questions focused on that purpose, okay? And that purpose will be around the pathways for Raumati, okay? I'll let you explain what that means, but I want you to just keep that in mind, because there's all sorts of tangents we could get off to, okay? They will give you some background, but we will be focusing mainly on the pathways, and that's the information that they will be able to feed back into the process, okay? So the more we can focus around that area, the more the community will benefit through the process. Okay? When that time comes, I'll give you a queue up if you want to ask a question, and we will just take first come, first serve on that basis until we run out of time. Alright? Simple as that. Okay? I will kind of manage that because we've only got one microphone, so I'm going to be doing a lot of running. Forgive me if I start puffing. Before we kick off though, does anyone have any questions about any of that? Are we comfortable with kind of how things are going to go tonight? Does that make sense? Right on cue, okay. Yeah.
This one question generally as to how the whole CAP process feeds into the council.
Sorry, I won't get into that kind of question. I just think questions about how this is going to work tonight. And in terms of that sort of question, we'll leave that for Q&A afterwards, alright? But by all means, bring a question. But the other thing, well, we'll talk about questions when it's question time. So I think that probably covers off the main things that we need to talk about. If there's a fire, get out. If there's an earthquake, I guess hide under your neighbour. If there's a tsunami, I think we're supposed to go to Raumati South school. We're not going to make it here, so whoever's fastest, good luck. If you can make it, good on you. But yeah, so I'll pass it over to the CAP members now. Actually, just including in terms of wording, it might be worth clarifying. You might hear some different words that mean the same thing tonight. Takutai Kapiti, CAP panel. These things all mean the same thing. Alright, so if you hear people talk about Takutai or CAP, they're talking about the same thing. Okay, this is the CAP panel, it's also the Takutai Kapiti panel. So I will pass it over to our CAP members who are here graciously tonight, off their own back, to engage with this community. Okay? No one's forced them to be here tonight. Some people think they shouldn't be here tonight. So we really welcome, we're very grateful for the fact that you're here tonight. We really appreciate you taking time to be here tonight to talk to our community. So I will hand it over to you guys to talk about yourselves.
Thank you, Dean. And I must say to all of you, thank you for coming out tonight and spending a bit of time with us. It's really important that we set a scene and that we get you to understand that we actually represent the community and we are not part of the council. And why that's important is because for us to be able to do that, we need to hear from all of you. If you don't share your knowledge, your experiences and your information, then what we actually end up saying back to the council may not be as complete as it should be. First though, I'll just introduce the other members of the Kapiti. My name is Don, and we have Kelvin, Susie and Martin, who's sitting in the audience. And one of the things that we all have in common is that when we put our hand up to be selected for the panel, we all really were committed to making sure that the community had a strong voice in whatever decisions the council makes. And it's important to reflect on the fact that we don't make any decisions. We can certainly work our way through the process that we've been given, but in the end, all we can make is a bunch of recommendations. And if the council so chooses, they can just as easily ignore. So getting the public involved certainly can make a difference. So thank you for being here. We've got a presentation, and when we were thinking about this, and the community board had asked us to come along and talk to you tonight about one of the pathways for Raumati, and then to come again tomorrow and talk about another of the pathways. So some of you might come twice. I'm not sure if we'll get a different audience tomorrow night. So that's what we're going to do, but we thought before we get to that, it's important for us to recognise that there may be people who don't really know much about the CAP and what we've been doing, and we want to make sure that everybody's on the same page. So we're doing quite a bit of scene setting in this presentation here tonight. So bear with us. Hopefully that will give you some insights as to where we're coming from and might help generate questions that can be helpful, and certainly where we can take some useful information away and use it before we get to writing reports and recommendations further down the track. So, can we have the next slide? As a way of setting the scene so that you can see where we're coming from, we're not climate deniers. We're people who accept that climate change is real and that one of the consequences of that is rising sea levels and some coastal inundation, which is what we're focusing on. So we put up a graph which shows how average temperatures from climate change have changed over time. So you can have a look at that on the presentation you've got. There is an actual website address on the bottom of the slide if you want to get some more information. We also thought it was important in setting the scene to put some pictures up or images which show what's happened around here over the last few years, so that we're very clear on the fact that things are changing, that we're not immune from weather events. You can see the ones that are shown here, Takutai Kapiti and Waikanae, and on the next slide we have a graphical representation of how the coastline has changed over a period of 6 years. So the two photographs are taken at the same place. The fence has not moved, but you can see that the land is in a slightly different place. And of course, what that brings us to is that we're not immune from the sort of disasters that happened with Cyclone Gabriel. All of those sorts of weather events apparently are becoming more common, and certainly there isn't anywhere in the country that can say that they're immune from that happening in their area. So we've got a couple of cartoons here which really help to encapsulate sometimes how we think people are thinking about climate change and sea level rise. And that is, you can see in the cartoon on this side, the chap standing there, he's really saying this is something that's happening, it's happening more often, but it's still probably not time to do anything about it because it's not serious enough. But it's something from which we can't escape. And the other cartoon is effectively saying the same thing. People are recognising that the climate is changing and that that has having an impact on people and their lives, but they're not quite ready yet to commit to actually doing something really tangible in terms of planning on how they can deal with it. And this graph is just an extrapolation of two scenarios, future projections of how sea levels could rise over time, going right through to 2,150. At the bottom of the graph on my right-hand side, you can see a blue line, which is where we are now, and a couple of projections, and they're only projections, because while the science tells us some things and helps us to reflect and accept that things can change, they don't actually tell us when and by how much. So we've got to try and work around scenarios that can give us some feedback and some information and understanding of what it might be like in those sorts of scenarios. But it could well be different. There are all sorts of factors in play which could change things. So let's talk about the CAP and our process. We've actually been around now since August 2021. And when all of us put our hand up to be selected for the panel, we were told at that time that it would take a year. It's taken a little bit longer, and I have to say that when we make our report at the end of May, that can certainly not be the end of the process, because we are not going to get through all of the steps that need to be taken, and so they are going to need to continue, and the council is going to need to take steps to ensure that that can happen. But the first thing that we did when we received the first batch of scientific information from our technical advisory group is that we divided the whole of the coastline into 5 areas. And we did that because the changes are not likely to be consistent across the whole coastline. It will vary from place to place. And if we take Raumati as an example, you've got a lot of structures, you've got a lot going on down here, that's different from what's going on up north, say, in Otago. So we divided into the 5 areas you can see there. We have the northern, central, Raumati, Queen Elizabeth Park and Paikakariki. We actually won't be dealing with Queen Elizabeth Park because Queen Elizabeth Park is under the control of the regional council, and that council has a management plan for Queen Elizabeth Park. And so my understanding is that that's where that will be dealt with, and certainly we won't be developing any pathways for Queen Elizabeth Park. So after dividing the area into those 5 adaptation areas, we then go through a fairly well-defined standard process in each area. We define objectives, we refine our actions and priorities, we develop the pathways, and then we add the multi-criteria decision analysis, criteria weighting and analysis tool to give us some scores which will enable us to rank the pathways and figure out which ones might be best. Now we've done work in those areas, but again, we cannot confirm the numbers we've got because there isn't a track, and there's still more work to be done. But if we move on to the next slide, that one shows the adaptation assessment areas. Important to say that within each area there are a number of sub-areas. So for here in Raumati, you've got the northern and the southern adaptation areas and an inundation area, and in other areas they're divided up. So we're not looking at the whole of the coast in a particular adaptation area as one unit. So, first thing we do, we need to find out what's important to the community. And as was mentioned by Dean in his introduction, we had a community values workshop about July last year at the Raumati Bowling Club. It was quite a robust and entertaining event, I must say, and we learned a lot of stuff. We took a lot away from that and we've been able to use, because it actually generated 1,163 comments. And that's a lot of material for us to sift our way through and refine and turn into something that we can use. And as those of you who may have been there will recall, we had 4 standard questions which we asked and which we asked at every one of these types of sessions. And those are what we actually based our next step on. So we took those community values, all of those comments, and we filtered them down to really 5 key themes. So this is what we thought the community were telling us: that you enjoy access to your local natural environment, the coastline sustains your community and contributes to your well-being, the beach is an accessible recreation space for your community, you want to ensure good infrastructure and governance processes that protect the community, and a level of physical protection from potential hazards. So those are what we ended up with as the 5 key themes. And so what we had to do then was to turn those into an objective that we could use to develop pathways. And along the way, as part of this, and I haven't included it in the presentation because I didn't want to make it too complicated, our technical advisory team will carry out, or did carry out, a risk assessment to look at all of the different elements that are in the multi-criteria decision tool to ensure that we identified low, medium, high and extreme risks that would affect the sorts of pathways that we develop. So that is the actual objective that we came up with. And what's really important about that objective is that we get some feedback from you about whether we got that part of the process right, because it's quite crucial. Because if we haven't got the right objective, then everything we do from here on might not be quite on track and may need to be varied or altered. So the next step for us is that we then look at what is the smorgasbord of options and actions. So you can see across there that we have a whole bunch of different options. We can enhance, we can accommodate, we can protect, retreat, or avoid. And then under each of those there are different things we can do. And what happens is that the technical advisory group, they give us a long list of options to go through, and they have a look at them themselves. And we then debate all of the options, really to determine are they in or are they out. There's not much point in having an action or option available that actually doesn't make sense in your area. So we narrow the list down to the things that we think, yes, they will apply, and they may not be, but if they were, they actually work. They do some good. So that's really our short list of options and actions. And from that, we then develop pathways. And so we undertake, after the risk assessment's been completed, and we undertake a development of pathways using two scenarios. And what they effectively are is a low risk and a high risk. And keep in mind that nobody really knows what that means. So it's important that we actually get a spread so that whatever happens, the pathways are likely to be useful and work. And we look at the impacts of the sea level rise scenarios across the built environment, across people, ecology, the natural character, and the cultural values, so that we have a broad range of different characteristics in focus. And so, as part of looking at those criteria, and you can see from this slide here that there were actually 8 of them. They're in that circle. I hope you can read them. Those are the criteria that we use to actually develop the pathway. And the first stage of that is, and I know you can't read this because the print is very small, so here it is, I need to try and fit it on the slide, so you've got an understanding of the process of going through. So we take the actual weighting chart. What that is, it's all of those MCDA weightings with an explanation of what they are. And what we recognise is that while all of those weightings are important, some are more important than others. So we give them a weighting. And it's a weighting of 1 to 3. So you can see there in the column in the middle of the chart, a whole bunch of numbers, 1, 2 or 3, and that is the weighting that the CAP assigned to each of those criteria. And that then affects the whole of the scoring that flows from that. Because the next phase is then something which is even more arguably, and that is the scoring guide. So we look at each of the criteria and we score them on a range of from 1 to 5. 1 being it's terrible, it's going to make things worse, and 5 being it's absolutely wonderful, it's going to enhance things and make them a lot better, and then there's some scores in between. And so that's all described in that guide. So let's just have a look now and just drill down on the Whanemaki Stream South. That's Unit 10A. Next slide, please. And these are the pathways that the CAP finalised after reviewing a long list of pathways that were supplied to us by the technical advisor. So what happens is the technical advisor just go away, they develop a great long list of different pathway options, they bring them back to us, and we go through and we refine those pathways and shorten the list down to what we think might work in any particular case or area. And each of the arrows that you can see between the pathways is actually a decision point, which we'll talk about a bit later on. And you can also see that the pathways, there's 3 of them, there's a short term, there's a medium term, and there's a long term. And that's quite deliberate because putting it in dates or times or years is fruitless because nobody really knows when any of this stuff's going to happen. So we can only work on the short, medium and long term and respond to the triggers that we put in place or are put in place to enable steps to move along that continuum. So having taken all of those pathways, we then turn that into a whole lot of numbers or scores. So if you have a look at this chart here, you can see the criteria are down one side, and the number in brackets is the weighting that's been taken off that earlier slide. And the pathways, 1 to 5, that you saw on the previous slide, are scored. And those scores are all added up so that we can tell which pathways may look the best at the moment and which may not look quite so favourable. However, again, I've got to qualify this and say to you, that's not fine. You can see that there's one column in there, blank, the AO values, and the reason is that those scores are being provided to us by our airway members on the panel, and we haven't got them yet, so quite a lot.
Probably, can we just cut back into afterwards? No worries. You will be asking questions.
What also is not in that table is what is a very important element in that according to economic analysis, because that will change. But we haven't got that yet. So after we've done this story, we then end up with what are the top three. And those are the top three pathways that came through on that story at the moment. And that again, as I said, could change because we haven't tried to see this yet. So that's what it looks like, three pathways, all of them, as you can see when you look at them, they get a bit more significant, a bit more complicated, and probably a bit more scary as you move across the continuum. So what we want to talk about, having shown you the pathways, is what happens next, because one of the most critical things with any of these pathways is knowing when actually a pathway should be activated, and also knowing when it is time to start feeling ready to activate one of those pathways, because there has to be a lead time to put a pathway in place. So for example, if one of the pathway options is to build a seawall, you can't say today, the time to build a seawall, we'll do it tomorrow. That's not going to work. You're going to actually have to plan how's that going to happen, how long is it going to take to get things done, and know that you can actually get that seawall, in that example, in place in time to be of value to the community. So what you get are you get signals that are in place to warn us that things are changing, it might be time to start thinking about doing something. You then get triggers that say, hang on, it's now time to do it, and then thresholds which then come up as you move forward and you hit the next lot of signals and start going through the process again. So that's actually how that works. We haven't done any of that yet, so I don't know what it looks like and I can't actually show it to you. So just moving on to, this is where we've got to and what's coming up next. I suppose the good news is we're going to talk about signals, triggers and thresholds next week. I'm not sure how far we get because there's a lot of work that needs to be done in that space and we're not going to get done in time for our report. There's an economic analysis which again will change all the scores. We will get that at a workshop on the 3rd of April. So we'll in factor that in and we'll need to get that out to the community so you can see that. And you can see more clearly how the pathways are looking with some more scores in. We'll have a final webinar to wrap everything up before we settle down to write a report and then present it to the council. And what happens after that is entirely in the hands of the council. So that basically summarises where we're at, so we're very happy to take into account.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Tom. That's really useful. Hopefully now gives everybody at least a good understanding of what the process involves. So, probably for some of you that's sort of still taking some of that in, others of you are very up to speed with bits of that process that we're here to attack. But we're going to move into the question time. So I just want to again just repeat a couple of things in terms of let's ask our questions respectfully. Okay, we don't want to get into slaying matches or kind of ongoing debates. We just like a question. The CAT members can give you the answer as best that they can. There may be some things they can't answer. There may be the odd question that isn't for you that maybe I can kind of give some context on as well, depending on kind of what people are interested in. So as I said, I'm going to set the microphone stand here as our kind of standing point. If you do want to ask a question, just come up and stand here. It's just going to make it easier rather than if people can't speak very loudly, we've got to get the microphone, and that's not going to be all that easy and things like that. So that just allows us to kind of get through speakers kind of efficiently. We have set aside till 9 o'clock, so we've got plenty of time. Okay? We're not in a kind of a drastic rush to get through everybody. But we just want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to have their say. If you've got a second question, by all means, keep to the back of the queue and come back again. Okay? If somebody else has already asked the question that you want to ask, maybe don't repeat it. If it's already been answered, there's sort of no point wasting a whole lot of time going over and over things. But if it hasn't been asked before and it's of value, then by all means, it's a good question. If things do get a bit crazy, I'm just going to raise my hand, in which case can everybody just stop and we'll just figure out where we're at and then keep going. Okay? I don't want to have to break up the meeting, I want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to kind of have their say. So, there was a question down here during the presentation, sorry.
If somebody has a question about a particular slide, let me know which one and I'll put it up so everybody can see.
Cool. Yeah. So would you like to come forward and ask a question? And that might give the rest of you a bit of a chance to start kind of filing up behind them and see what you get to. So when you do come up, if you maybe just state your name and let us know how long you've lived in Raumati, just so we know kind of, just for each other's sake, kind of who we all are.
I'm Hamish. I've only been here 6 months. My question is not very elaborate or anything. It was just clarifying a few things about the presentation. So I noticed on the list of pathways, there was a pathway 6 star, but then there was only 5 pathways that were scored. So I was just wondering what the situation is with that.
That's when we went back to the, sorry, we went back to the planning and the technical method and said, is that a really feasible solution? And in discussion and debate, we decided it wasn't. It was a process like that, so the CAP actually went, we questioned them about it, and said, no, that is not realistic.
Up there.
Can't hear what you're saying.
It's all right. That's very good question.
Just hold it right up.
What Helen was saying was that though there was initially 6, when we were in the meeting, there was one there that just wasn't feasible, so we dropped that off. And I think that was to do with the fact that there is not a lot of sand here compared to Waikanai or Otaki. So where you might be doing dune restoration here, it would be a very different issue to bring it up here. So it was just really a technical infeasibility.
Thank you. All right.
I've actually got 3 questions, but they're just yes, no, and so there's not a big queue behind me. I might go over them. So we understand the importance of having a big trusting panel members, such as yourselves. That's why we kindly request your confirmation that you've had the opportunity to read Jacob's Volume 1 and 2 reports and have a comprehensive understanding of the technical and scientific data and modelling that underpins the recommendations for the Kapiti District.
That was apparently a yes, no question.
So we kindly request your confirmation that you have had the opportunity to read Jacob's Volume 1 and 2 reports and have a comprehensive understanding of the technical and scientific data and modelling that underpins the recommendations for the Kapiti District.
Yes. I'd say that, yeah. I would say that we're not
trigger points for recognising how soon it's going to come, and then developing the community engagement so it makes the right decision to proceed when it does start to come. So there's a huge structural network here that's much wider than Jacob's report, and we will back very much to that.
Right, so not just the Jacobs report, but you are familiar with the Jacobs report, you understand the science underpinning that report, is that right? Is that fair to say? Okay.
Will the CAP members be providing recommendations to the council for district planning purposes? If the answer is yes, what is the estimated timeline for those recommendations?
The recommendations that the CAP provides to the council, it will be up to the council to decide what happens to those recommendations. We cannot dictate to the council how they use it. Certainly, in the terms of reference, it mentions the recommendations being used for a variety of different purposes by the council to meet its own statutory obligations. But we can't actually require the council to do that. We can just simply make the recommendations and leave it up to the council to decide how to proceed further.
And I might just add a little bit to that, because that does involve some council stuff that I'm aware of. So for those of you who don't understand how that works, CAP panel is an independent panel. They will make formal recommendations to council. Council will then run its own process in terms of what it does with those recommendations. And that could mean everything from, we know local and central governments get these $1 million reports and ignore them, or sometimes they adopt them whole as follows. So that will be a consultation process with the community in terms of what council does, but that's separate from what CAP does. CAP's role is just to make the recommendations.
Final question, should be a short one. Will CAP have follow-up engagements in Takutai and Waikanai and Kapiti? And if so, what will those dates be?
At this stage, we are scheduled to attend the Raumati Community Board meeting on the 26th of March, but we don't have a date for Waikanai, and we don't have another date for Kapiti at this stage.
And I should add, we do actually have Raumati Community Board member Karl Weber here tonight, and we also have, I did refer to Councillor Martin Harvey when he came in, we also have Deputy Mayor Lawrence Kirby, just in case you thought we were going to hide in the crowd there, Lawrence, and also our own Raumati Community Board member John Best arrived too, so welcome John. Okay, who's next? Sorry. Sorry, it's guys, and so also Raumati Community Board member Bernie Daniel as well. And it's Raumati Community Board member Guy Burns. We're all here. And Raumati South Residents Association Chair Claire Hind as well. And all of you who are also being.
I have another really boring question like last one, but I noticed that on the scoring, I think it was pathway 3 and 4 maybe, that scored the same at the bottom, but then on the short list of pathways there's only 3. Do we know what, like, is there a reason for excluding pathway 3?
That's a question that we've gone back for to find out why and what happened. It could be that the Maori values changed that process or the sequence. We don't know, so that's the question that we've actually got out at the moment.
Okay, so just to clarify that the 3 that are on the presentation is a draft 3 and they can change. Yeah, okay.
That 3 can change once the costume change.
Right. Okay.
My name is Jane. I've lived here for 24 years now. I just had a question about the pathways template. seeing it, who decides what that line is going to be? And also, just the dune reconstruction, where would those dunes actually be? Because there are not a lot of dunes from the stream down to the start of Kingston Park. So I can't imagine it's going to sort of part of it.
Who would like that question? Yes, they're all the good on. Yes, Alison.
The line won't be developed by the committee, this will be done afterwards, after the recommendation,
So by council?
by council.
So that makes it a bit more difficult for people who live here to make a comment if we don't know where the line is going to be.
Absolutely, yes. Can't deny that, but we have no idea where that line will be.
Okay. Is it not a very crucial thing for this meeting?
We're talking about a pathway through a process,
I understand.
and that's the major issue. We can't actually forecast what is going to be happening down the track. That's not our role.
Okay. Can I reply to that?
Susie wants to add something else.
More questions there. I'm just wondering whether the word "the line" up there, re-establishing the line, is, are you reading into that re-establishing the line as in prior with the Shand report when there was a line? Are you seeing the word "the line"? What do you?
Well, I'm seeing the line as a point that you will protect to, and so on this side of the line you'll let it go, and then all of a sudden you might decide to protect. So is it roads, or is it houses, or where are you going to draw that line?
Yeah.
Right, that's,
Well, it's a cyclone over Riau, and it took out, the wall. Then a trigger would be reached, and I guess that's when the consultation happened. And you guys go. Yeah.
Right.
I'm just concerned about the line being misconstrued.
right, so what I'm taking from that is that first of all, it will be decided by council, not CAP. And second of all, it'll effectively just be decided by nature depending on what actually happens. Is that right? Which is uncertain. Does that make sense?
It does,
But
however,
then how do you answer the question about an uncertain future?
what is the point of all
Right.
of this if you haven't drawn a line in the sand, so to speak? As to where you will protect.
Is that something that you think needs answering there? My sense is it's probably unknown from your perspective.
It has to be defined at some point.
Yep.
We can't hear.
You said it has to be defined at some point.
Yeah, at some point that will have to be defined. That isn't our role to define that. Our role is to look at it and say, okay, and I'm wondering if the word line is the wrong word to use. Is there another word that should be used that is less emotive or less constricting? Anybody think of something?
I think this is some critical answering these issues about this.
Come on up. Sorry for jumping in there. Action question asked again.
I mean, I've got a big current property on Rosetta Road, and so when I hear that, I think that, that with our property, which is quite close to the sea, are you going to take some of that property away? Like, there must have been ideas in your head to actually write that and meaning behind that. Like, otherwise it's just nothing, it means nothing. So it's there needs to be some sort of concept of, were you thinking that some houses would be cut off, or were you thinking, and I don't know, it just doesn't make sense to me. Now that's going to be triggered by nature. Don't we wait to see what nature does and then we make the decision? Because otherwise this is just pie in the sky.
Thank you, Carol.
One of the things that we're looking at here is it's a lot of unknowns. It's a bit like we've got a plan in place if we have a tsunami. We have a plan in place if we have an earthquake. We don't know if they are going to happen, when they're going to happen, how big they're going to be. So what we're talking about here is we don't know what sea level rise is going to be. We've got no idea. We know at this point that the ground was actually subsiding in this part of the coast. Is that going to carry on? We don't know. There are so many unknowns here, which is why we're not putting any time frames in place, or saying that the sea's going to rise by 2 meters by 2075 or whatever. We're not doing that. We can't do that. It's unrealistic. And things are changing anyway in terms of forecasts. We're talking about the West Antarctic ice sheet now. Some scientists are saying that that already has gone past the point where it will not be locked onto the land below it. We don't know what the implications of that are. So we're in the dark as much as you are on this kind of thing. It's actually putting something there that's it's actually up for debate. That's why we're talking to you. We're not making decisions without communicating. We want to hear what your thoughts are, because they can modify the thoughts the same way as our questions have modified some of the tax proposals. It's an ongoing process.
I just wanted to respond directly to that question, because I think it's a really pertinent question. It makes a lot of sense. If I look at that line that you referred to in your question, in the short term, where it talks about status quo, if you've got a seawall, then status quo is maintaining that seawall. And what this actually assumes is that a new seawall apparently is built, and apparently is in program, because we've been told there's a seawall that is planned. So we start with the point where you've got that nice new seawall and it's protecting your property. But if circumstances change and that seawall begins to be undermined, that may trigger action to actually enhance that seawall to ensure it continues to protect your property. But then things may deteriorate further to a point where you have to re-establish, in other words, build a new seawall because the old one's not working anymore, and it's got to be further back than the original one was. Now that's looking very, very long term, but that's what that pathway contemplates. That in the end, and we could be talking 100 years, who knows, that where the seawall is established at present is no longer going to work. The sea is going to come past there and undermine that seawall, and a new one's going to have to be established, and depending upon what happens as to where that will be. So we couldn't say to you now, this is going to be here on the map, what's going to be there, because we don't know. So does that help answer the question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
You might be taking to this week.
No, it's all right.
Yeah, I'm Jill Ward, and some of you probably know me, but I'm the person that lives on the property where the house fell into the sea in 1976. My grandmother lived there, and I've been coming up here since the 1940s, so probably no one else has been doing that. And what I've read about this, first of all, I had pathways. I thought, oh my God, Does that mean walking along it? Or does it mean something sort of spiritual, like this way to make ourselves feel better? So probably all those things are better. Don't want to look silly and sort of say the wrong thing. Okay. I should get used to it by now, shouldn't I? Anyway, what I want to, I've taken some photographs of a lot of the damage that's down after, in front of my house. I'm a stakeholder, aren't I? Because I live on, because I live there, and I look down every day and you see all these terrible things that people fall into. And as for enjoying the coastline, I think falling down a cliff, that's like a cliff that's up, and breaking your ankle isn't exactly enjoying it. And so one of my questions is hopefully you will really make sure that these things are looked after. You can unmany those. Once there's a hole there, I don't want to have to keep seeing photographs of council and ringing them up and saying, and look at my rates. I'm not going to swap my rates, I think. Not fixing up the railway station. My good thought on that is that all those people will be living in those houses living up before the railway station is finished, so, it's taking on. I'm sorry. Anyway, so I would like that could be something to make the pathways that people are going to damage themselves on. And the other thing is, because there's a little Jane Shirley Park in front of Hydes Road, from Hydes Road, you go down there, and you won't be going down for a swim, but the other thing is, what about getting a wheelchair down there so somebody can sit in that park? There's a way you can do it, because I've looked, because I know the distance of 1 and 12 for a wheelchair to go down. So that would be something, thinking about people in wheelchairs and putting, that's all part of the enjoying, which comes up, enjoy it. So we'd like that to us, those are my questions, besides my comments. Okay, so the holes and things, not leaving them for 6 weeks, but and I shouldn't have to get in touch with the council to remind them. So, okay? Sure.
I will just probably shortcut that by saying a lot of that is for the council, not for cats. It's certainly interesting in terms of the values and the enjoyment and the well-being. But in terms of the recommendations, then that sort of stuff can certainly be in your mind when you make those recommendations, can't it? Do you want to say something?
I think one of the points we want to make to the council is that this is a developing area in the technology and the engineering scene very much. And there's a company now in Petone that is pioneering a totally new type of coastal defence. And Great Wellington Regional Council pulled them in to put up the road going around from Lake Ferry. And this is fast stuff. In another couple of years, there'll be new things going on. Overseas, in the United States, they're running awards every year for new designs for coastal defence. It's a very dynamic area, and we need to keep up with it.
The rocks and tremendous difference. All those rocks.
For better or worse?
They work.
Right. Some people don't like it. All right.
Yeah, I'm Ken Hobson. I've been up the coast since mid-1960s. My parents owned a house on Manly Street. We moved away, I've come back in '99 and been here ever since. One thing is obviously, the CAP team have got a process that have got to be followed through. It's predominantly based on science. There's probably a lot of people in the room that doubt the science or question the science. My question to the CAP team was, why has no one actually gone to the Anglican Church records where they have got very accurate records that are not scientific, they are documents of what happens on the day, every single day of the year, and they're still maintained today. need to make an appointment, I can organise appointments, but all the records are there. I was able to go to get some of the records. I was predominantly focusing on climate change at that time. The records pointed me to an employee of the Wellington Map Service who started in Wellington Map Service when the building was built. It was his signature on every single temperature card that was recorded up until he retired, and the building was subsequently being closed by earthquake requirements. But that is a proven track record. Climate change, temperature in particular, which is what I mainly focused on. I have been to National Library, I've been to the archives, I've been to the Anglican Church, and all the records are there. When they read the temperature, it didn't matter if it was 24.8 degrees in their view, they had to document 24 degrees. They were not allowed to round it up because it never got to the 25. I have made several requests to NIWA, who are now documenting the temperatures. The original Met Office temperatures are still recorded, but they will not isolate those Met Office temperatures out exclusively for me. I only get an average temperature, which is increased because they're now including decimal points, plus they don't actually always have the same standards, but by isolating it at the Kelvin Met Office, nothing's changed. The building hasn't moved, the sun hasn't shifted to a different point, there's no covers over it. All I'm saying is, why don't we use a common reference point that has been there for years when making these evaluations?
There are an awful lot of science papers out there that I don't know about that cover all the records, not just New Zealand, but Australia has got, we know very well, Australia's got much better Met records than New Zealand has. These things are all being studied in quite a lot of detail. The people who presumably do have access to data you weren't able to get hold of, and in more detail perhaps. But the point is that that's the past. What we're looking at now is where it's going. And so the most important thing for like the last 30 years of data. What happened 100 years ago is not so relevant now. And for that, the last 30 years of data, we have high-precision satellite data on a lot of that. That's giving us things like surface temperature, it's giving us things like sea level, stuff like that. So now it's not just records on paper, it's gigabytes. On my computer, I would have about 50 gigabytes of sea level data. You know, that's what we're talking about now. And you have to have a technique for analysing that. And it's all public domain. All that stuff is you can get it. You can get satellite information on sea level around New Zealand for free. Lots of it.
Cool. Right, thank you. Good question. Useful information.
Hi everyone, my name's Tanya. I'm from a group called CALM. That stands for Calm Alarmist Law Magnus. We have a website and a Facebook site. Visit us sometime, you'll find some very interesting stuff on there. We also question the science that's being used at the moment. The science is not settled. The Jacobs report that's being used, I have a question on that. Does CAP have the terms of reference for volumes 1 and 2? For it? Anyone?
That's probably useful now, is it?
We don't follow it. What's the question?
Do you have the terms of reference for it? go on public record and say that you know the terms of reference for it?
No.
You're not? Okay, that's interesting. The second question I have is, the Jacobs reports are using the 2017 Ministry for the Environment guidelines. Are you aware of the caveat on the first page that states the information provided has no official status and so does not alter the laws of New Zealand, as it is not a statutory document such as the New Zealand Coastal Policy Statement?
Yes, this is an area of science I've worked in for many years. I know one of the authors of the first report that came out criticising use of that high scenario. But then we tell you what the context was. It was about global average temperature. Very specifically, if you go back and read his original comment, it was in the top journal Nature, and with another co-author that I don't know, but it's of the same quality. And what they were talking about is the temperatures, not sea level. Now, the argument they make is that if you look at that very high scenario, there'll be so much problems before we get there to the top end, that thing will never get there. And that's right, but that is what human emissions of carbon dioxide and other greenhouse gases are doing. And therefore we could stop because of all the chaos it's causing. Sea level rise is totally different. And again, there are several follow-up papers following this one pointing out why the sea level rise is different. As has already been mentioned here, we know that some of those ice sheets may well cross sustainability. They may take 1,000 years to collapse, but it will cause 3 meters of sea level rise or more. So we're talking about totally different things when we go back to the IPCC saying that why the high scenario doesn't seem very likely. The sea level rise works through the uncertainty of what nature is doing rather than what people are doing.
So why is RCP 8.5 actually included in there? Because the ICPP, that's the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, they themselves say it's implausible. So why is it included? Because that has a catastrophic effect on our community here if that's used. So why use it?
Therefore, is the question, why will it be catastrophic?
I would say that managed retreat is pretty catastrophic for our community, wouldn't you? People having to leave their homes because that's the end game with this.
Sorry, I'm going to stop you there. Notice that managed retreat is not part of the solution here.
Well, it's mentioned in all the documents.
Something that is mentioned at the meeting we were at, and where the people down there recognise that some of them are going to have to retreat.
I'm sorry, it's so hard to hear you with your mask on. Is there any way you can just move your mask on?
Can I just, maybe this is an apt time just for me to clarify how our managed retreat fits in there. You're keen to say something, John?
Well, I think one of the things that concerns me as a community member on the CAP is that it's important to avoid dealing with the context about who's got the best sites. It's not going to take us forward, and it's not going to help us do the planning that we need to do. And so when you make references to different scenarios as being more difficult or unhelpful than others, all they are is scenarios, because what will happen will happen. So what we have to accept as the CAP is that if we believe the science, things may change, and as a community, we have to prepare and be ready to respond if changes do occur. And while all of us would dearly love to be able to continue enjoying our lifestyles without having to change anything, that would be unrealistic. So we need to think about these sort of things and accept the fact that while different reference points have been used, there's all sorts of different, apparently, science floating around. The only part of it that I think is useful is that it tells us that things could change and they could affect our lives, and in that case, we may need to do something. So we can make some choices. We can ignore it and put our heads in the sand, or we can say, yes, let's think strategically and do some planning, so that if triggers are reached at some time in the future, we know what we're going to do.
And was there a comment about the, in response to the managed tree comment as well?
It's irrelevant to the dynamic of the property. It's about Raumati South.
So are you saying that managed retreat is not one of the options you're looking for Raumati South? For Raumati generally? Right. So that was when, so my understanding of that, clarify if I'm wrong, that's showing the options that were put to CAP at the start in terms of these are all the possible options. When we've got to looking at the draft options, managed retreat is dropped off as an option because it's not one they're exploring for Raumati. Is that correct? Okay. Right, good to get it clarified.
If you look at those three pathways, then you can actually see on here that it says recruit and protect. So I think there is an argument that could be raised, and perhaps a little misunderstood, about retreat as an option. But if we have a long-term action that is re-establish the line, then re-establishing the line may mean that properties will be affected because the new line is where there are currently properties. So the lady who asked the question earlier on, the answer to that question was yes. It could be many, many years ahead, but it is something which is on that pathway and which we need to take into consideration, but not something probably that we need to be concerned with now.
I'm Veronica. We've been here for just over 4 years now. My question is completely different. I'm just interested to know what economic models you're going to be using to do the economic assessment. So whether you're going to be using, whether that's going to be focused specifically on the financial costs, or whether you're looking at a more holistic model around, for example, planetary boundaries and social impacts.
The answer is we don't know. We know that there is a financial analysis that is being undertaken, an economic analysis on those three pathways that are up here on the screen, but we have not been told what is actually involved, what is included, what is excluded, and what that analysis might look like. We're going to be finding that out on the 3rd of April, so we'll be able to share that with you then.
Perhaps I can put you in email contact with Dawn to follow up on that.
And I would encourage you that if it is specifically focused just on the numbers, that you push back on that a little bit and ask them to consider a more holistic economic model.
Thank you.
My name is Ian Collins. I'm a member of Mountain Road in Macedonia. Thank you to Karl for your code here. My point, thank you to organise this tonight. I'm just here, like a lot of us, as a local homeowner. Bought a place here 4 years ago, and my neighbour Chris is here as well. We're in Tennis Court Road, so we've one sand dune with back. And perhaps I should have done some research before I came, but it's good to be part of the community. I just wanted to know about the, what you've got there, the new coastal hazard provisions in the Coastal Environment District Plan changes. That's something that's changed since, is the zoning of hazard changed on the Tennis Court Road since I moved here 4 years ago?
council's role, isn't it? That would be part of, forgive me if I'm wrong, the district plan change would need to happen, so no such zoning change would have happened in years. No. But
Is that what you're putting this towards now, on the coastal hazard provisions?
so the process that council goes under after this will lead into a plan change. That's right. Coastal plan change. Yeah. So that will happen, and that will be big consultation with the community about that process at that stage. These recommendations will feed into that.
Okay, so it could, if the hazardous zoning, that type of thing.
Yeah. Still to come.
G'day. My name's Philip Norton, and I'm the resident of Karl Weber on the dunes. John, at the beginning you indicated that your view that CAP represented the community. I just wonder where you're getting that from. Is that part of your brief to represent the community, or is it for the community to represent themselves and make comments on CAP's recommendations once we see those recommendations?
Good question. Look, the best way to explain this is that when I put my hand up to go onto the panel, one of the key considerations was to ensure the community had a strong voice on that panel. But in order for that to happen, we actually need to be able to engage fully with the community and for the community to share their knowledge, their information, their concerns, because that, in the end, is what is going to drive the recommendations that we put into our report. So certainly, we're part of the community. That's just the only way I can express it. To be able to be part, we need your help. If we don't get that help, I mean, the point is that information we don't get, we can't use. And when I look around this room, I can see that we have this huge reservoir of experience, of knowledge, of information. And everybody sitting in this room knows stuff that nobody else themselves, apart from themselves, does. And some of that information could be helpful in this process if it can be actually shared. And sometimes it's not until you put pieces of information together, a bit like putting together a jigsaw puzzle, that a picture begins to emerge and things begin to make sense and they become useful. So from that perspective, we really do need the community, and we need to engage with the community, and our terms of reference expect us to do that.
One of our real top priority recommendations of the council is that this has to be an ongoing process. And you can look at what's happening up in Hawke's Bay, for example. It's been going for a long time there, and it's getting better as it goes. More engagement, more talking to people, more options analysis, all that sort of stuff. Happy's got to do as well. Keep going.
I agree. You have another part of it. From running.
50 more metres of sand dune. So just following on from that, and I have to disclose that I am an environmental lawyer and I am involved in this process from various perspectives, including assisting crew. Is it fair to say that CAP doesn't, it isn't part of CAP's mandate to represent the community? It's a process, and I'm not in any way detracting from the process, but you don't have a mandate either from the community or the council to represent the community. It's up to the community at the end of the day to represent themselves and make submissions and comments on your report.
I'm just going to say, I have a mandate to represent the community, and I brought them from what you guys want to say.
You're absolutely right. I mean, in the end, the community is always free to represent themselves, but what our terms of reference require us to do is to engage with the community to listen to what the community has to say and to ensure that we take those views on board when we're formulating the recommendations we make to the council.
So just following on from that, if we could perhaps get the second last slide up, which was the next steps. So, and I appreciate your last answer, and I think we could summarise the point as CAP is not representing the community, that is not its role, but it is its role to engage with the community in doing what it's doing. In terms of engagement, you've got some pretty tight time frames, and I'm not telling you anything you don't know. It seems to be pretty impossible time frames to me, but you're still waiting for an economic analysis. You're waiting for input from the iwi group. You've gone through this process here, and thanks Bea for organising this for the Raumati community, but there doesn't seem to be any process organised for the other communities to have the sort of discussion we're having tonight. And the discussion's been very useful in terms of understanding the process you're going through, but we haven't got to the point where there are any recommendations. And what seems to be missing out of this next steps is doesn't seem to be a process where you're going to release draft recommendations and seek public feedback, community feedback before they go to council. And I can't see how you can engage with the community without putting your recommendations back out to the community and saying, we now seek your feedback before we finalise these. And I'd just like your response on that.
And you're absolutely right, and we have every intention of going back to the community when we've got some economic analysis that we can share, and when we've got some draft recommendations and a draft report written that we are finalising for the council. So even though I haven't shown it on that slide, it's certainly in our program, and you're right, the time frame is tight, but we're still very determined and committed to make sure that that level of engagement does happen, so that people get to see what we are proposing to recommend to the council before we finalise a report, and there's a chance to have some input.
My name is Donald Hunt. I'm an outlander. I'm actually from Otaki. And yes, we live on the other side of the road. Anyway, my question is engagement with the community, and we did make a request earlier towards the end of last year about CAP engaging with the Otaki area. Where do you go to come and see us, please?
I have been in contact with the chair of the Otaki Community Board and asked if arrangements can be made for us to come to Otaki to engage with the community in consultation with the community board as we're doing here, but we still haven't managed to arrange that at this point in time. But it's certainly on the agenda.
When did you make that approach, please?
Late last year.
About November?
Yeah, I think it might have been either November or December.
Okay.
So it was initiated prior to Christmas. And of course, Christmas and the closure of New Zealand gets in the way of things. And we were hopeful, we tentatively had a date set up in February, but we weren't able to make that happen.
We weren't advised of that date, but it was intimated. So, ASAP, please. Thank you.
What I could also mention is that Otaki, the northern adaptation area, is actually the only one of the areas where we reported back after we had developed the pathways And that was done in the Baptist church in Aotearoa about July last year.
Unfortunately, nobody was told about the meeting.
Quite a few people there.
Right, yeah.
Happy to go back.
Yeah, I think there's probably potential for that to become quite a debate. I think it's fair to say there weren't that many, and there has been some issues from parts of the community in terms of whether that was communicated. I have had conversations with the chair of the community board, and I know that has come up from time to time, coming back there, so that is in the background somewhere. Yeah.
Are you able to just put this slide? These questions might just be for me because I'm new to the area. But to find out, the pathways that you're talking about, do they relate to the entire purple area? Not just 10A or 9A or 9B? They relate just to 10A? Okay. And where is the top, is the line basically the stream? Okay, cool. So there'll be separate pathways that apply to A. Oh, that's tomorrow night. Okay. And what about 9B? Right. Sorry, what did you say?
We haven't been asked to do that.
Haven't been asked.
We've been specifically asked to implement on 10A, 9A and 10A.
What does 9B represent?
It's the inundation area, sub-area.
Meaning what?
So that's the area likely to be inundated from the
Under what scenario?
But
Is that the extreme?
So we've got to see a pathway that use the same scenario that was used on the erosion area. That's the same set of scenarios. A low one and a high.
But presumably the full extent is for the highest, most severe serial rise scenario.
That's just the area, the whole area.
Okay, so it doesn't necessarily suggest that all of that area will be flooded with water. No, okay, it's just a study area.
Yeah.
Okay.
My name's Martin Wright, and I've been with Kapiti here for a number of years now. The question I have is coastal being defined? Is it just a narrow strip along the waterfront, or is it something bigger than that?
The simple answer is very fuzzy. There are some, there are quite a few people who say up to 10 metres above sea level. And that's been used in some analysis for, say, Australia as well as New Zealand. But it's not, I mean, it depends really on the areas that will get affected by sea level rise. That would be another way of looking at it in our context. And so for Otaki, it goes that much further than it does from Raumati. So we take all those sort of local context into account.
Supplementary question? Kind of doesn't answer my question, because the recent flooding in the Hawke's Bay in Auckland, the main damage came from inland. And global warming is going to hit inland more, and if we get that heavy rain in the hills, all the pine-covered hills that are now being cut down, what's that going to do to all the low-lying areas? So just looking at the waterfront seems to be a very narrow view.
As we understand it, the council has a number of different streams of work underway, all of which need to be brought together so that the full impacts from all of these different streams can actually be understood. And certainly, from our perspective as a CAP, all of the pathways that we are developing could be impacted by things like rising groundwater and inundation further inland than just on the coast, because if water's coming in and water's going out at the same time, there's going to be a meeting point somewhere. But from our perspective, our brief is simply sea level rise and coastal inundation. There are other streams of work, and the council will be able to advise on what those are and where they are. But certainly they need to be taken into account with the work that we do.
Hi, I'm Joanne. Lived on the Kapiti Coast for many years. By the way, thank you to the Community Board for organising this community engagement. We're very lucky to have such a great community board here. Okay. So I just want a yes or no answer to this question. Are you aware that Jack's report are using the 2017 Ministry for Environment guidelines?
Is that a yes or no question?
I'll say it slowly. The Jake's report using the 2017 Ministry for Environment guidelines. That's what the Jake's report based this on. Is that what you understand? Yes or no?
Yes, I mean, going back to the Ministry for Environment 2017 report being included in the Jacob's analysis.
Yes.
Yes, that's right. They try to make it more specific to Kapiti region.
Thank you.
Yes.
That's right. I have a disclaimer here that the Ministry for Environment used, basically disclaiming their advice. So, are you aware that the Ministry for Environment has got a disclaimer for the work that Jacobs are relying on? Is the disclaimer?
Would you like to table that document?
Yeah.
Yes, I mean, this is saying that those reports the Ministry puts out don't constitute legal advice. And that has to come from the legislative framework, that has to come from other processes in government.
But they're not statutorily standing behind their recommendations for that disclaimer. Is that correct?
Doesn't say that.
Well, the disclaimer.
They stand behind their recommendation.
The disclaimer. The disclaimer there. Can we read it out?
Probably get into a fight about what a disclaimer means, but okay. So I take the fact you're not accepting that. My accountant has a disclaimer on her work when she does it for me, so really good. Professional advice.
I guess I'm a little bit puzzled. You know, you've been talking about community engagement, and a lot of people have been repeatedly talking to CAP and asking CAP to basically not use the RCP 8.5. It's an international IPCC have said that it's not plausible, and that the 4.5 is much more plausible. We can't understand, you're saying that you're doing community engagement, but this whole process is still on the 8.5, which is highly unlikely. And the reason why this is important, I believe, is because if we go back to that one, the last one slide that shows the map, the 10 point, and we're getting back to lines here, the last one. The last one was up. Yep. Okay, so we have lines there. Okay, so all those people that are in the line to the left of that thing, they are basically looking at having hazard lines in the form of a coastal adaptation area put on their titles, the limbs. In fact, council has already put warnings on limbs, so any new purchaser at the moment is getting their blanket across all of Kapiti Coast. So these lines are important. So by using extreme modelling, I believe we could be causing a lot of harm to our community. Firstly, in the instance of insurance hikes, because it's happening internationally and nationally all over New Zealand and the world. Insurance companies are raising their premiums to huge levels. And we're in a cost of living crisis, so by using incorrect science, implausible science, and using that as a recommendation to go back to council, then I believe that you are in an ability to actually harm this community quite strongly.
An interesting statement, but in fact it's not correct. It's somewhat misleading because the insurance company takes absolutely no notice of local government or anyone else for that matter when they are determining risk and what they will and won't insure. What they will look at from a local government perspective is if they have plans in place for dealing with these types of events that help them in their risk modelling to determine whether or not an area is suitable for them to insure or not to insure. So anything we do is not going to affect anybody's insurance. As I've said before, all the modelling does, or that we're doing, helps us to get our heads around possibilities, but they may or may not happen, but at least if we take that into consideration, we can actually be better prepared.
I think there may be a supplementary question on that.
Unfortunately, it's going on people's limbs now, so it is actually affecting purchasers right now, and real estate agents are having to deal with this now. It's 2 kilometres inland, which is absolutely a crazy, on an increasing coastline. I just can't understand why. I mean, the first one with Shannon, which got thrown out of the environmental court, only went, what, 2 kilometres? This is 2 kilometres in. This is crazy. And our coastline is accreting. And we don't get any answers back from you. Every time we ask, could you please be a bit more moderate? It's harmful. Anyway, so I disagree with what you're saying. Council will be informed by your recommendations. And that means that once this is on people's limbs, then their insurances are going to absolutely high.
So I guess just to sort of clarify that from my conversations with people in the community, what I would say is that one of the concerns in this whole process is that there's an impact that it may have in terms of saleability and value and insurability of homes, and so that's often one of the underlying concerns of the process. Obviously, whether that's fact or not is going to be debated.
Martin asked me what this slide again. Want to talk to Martin?
We're defined for that. We're looking for full range. We're not saying, we're all going to be flooded out in a certain time or anything like that. We're saying, that's an answer to what can happen. This is the most accurate analysis of the science that came out a couple of years ago, and it's been peer reviewed. Those reports go through 3 stages of peer review before they get out. This is the science. It's a wide range in the future. It's wider than it's presented. You have a right to say uncertain.
Can I just say that I think after the whole COVID debacle that peer review scientific papers many different things. And this does have an impact. From where I'm sitting, and I know people have done an awful lot of research, and I haven't. I've got young homeschoolers, and I've got a business, and I'm crazy busy. And I'd love to be involved in this because this impacts our business, and this impacts our home, but I don't have the time. But from what I've seen, I did go to the bowling club meeting, and Jim Bolger, from my memory, got up and he said, this, it won't impact your insurances and mortgages, which is actually just bullshit. Sorry, but this is so important this is supposed to be helping us as a community, but the mental health impact this has for so many of us It is huge, and it's like, why don't we wait for those triggers and actually deal with them at that point in time? When you've bought these properties that, you know there's always possibilities of things happening, but for me it's kind of the Kiwi way, just like, okay, you weigh things up and you make decisions, but then when the council and the government come in and then they overrule things, it makes it really, really difficult. Because I was just talking to an insurance manager and she was saying that in their company what they are saying is that, and I heard this at the Park Operating meeting as well, but it goes right back, and also looking at your picture there, that it does go right back to the old motorway, and she was saying that entire region is what they are looking at and not insuring. And she also said that government has set up, I don't have a question, I've got a statement, just I'll get quick. The government has also set up a committee to say, are they going to bail out these houses, and they may or they may not help. But I mean, this is just so huge, and so when these people have done so much research, and as so many of us do know, science isn't black and white. But from what I hear coming from you, it's your science is black and white to you. And I just want you to also consider the impact that this has leading up to whenever, or if an event happens.
Sorry, science is not black and white. It gets questioned all the time. The science is not black and white. It's somebody's view on it, and there are different views. What we're saying is, forget about the science and look at the facts. Have we got sea level rise? Don't we have sea level rise? If it isn't a rise by this much, what do we need to do?
Well, the fact is that it is affecting our insurance, and it is affecting possibly in future our mortgages.
The insurance side of things is nothing to do. They're doing their own thing, as you said.
So, but they're also talking about.
I'm just going to interrupt you just for a second, just for a sentence here. Just in terms of council has established targets and encouraged carry this out. As the work is driven by council, and they're carrying out the work with council contractors and some of that is not at the feet of CAP themselves, but from your view, that's a natural impact from the work, and I take that on board certainly. I guess from what I've seen is insurance companies, from what I've seen, this is what I'm looking at, their risk scenarios are way more than anything else. I agree that they're not really that interested in local government because they're looking way further than what local government is looking at. You should be very concerned with what your insurance companies are considering.
Yeah.
But that's a whole other question. If anything, this might actually protect us from some of the worst case scenarios that insurance companies are putting out. That's just my.
You're right, and my family's been here since the late 70s. We've lived here for about 10, 15 years, something like that. My question is, thank you for the information, for you setting this up. I'm interested in is there someone here who can give a little idea of what Mari Iwi are thinking about? Because that's important. Is there anyone here who can speak to that, or where I find that information?
There was actually a gap in some of that work. Yeah.
I just meant for someone.
There are two cultural reports from the EEO and the EE down south. They are in the public domain. Cultural values.
Yeah. So just on that point, all of the information, I'll say all, because you never know, somebody might have dropped something off, but the information that CAP is using in preparing and presenting, that stuff all goes up onto the website. So it is all publicly available. If you know how to navigate the website.
Hi, my name's Deborah. I basically lived on the Kapiti Coast most of my life, so basically from 1970, it's quite young, isn't it? I'm up here because it's great that we've got handout, but I sort of, for me, I don't know about anybody else, I do quite like a graph or something that I can sort of get my teeth into. I was wondering, in terms of historical data for the Kapiti Coast, I know we've got global sea level rising here, but I was hoping to see something that was closer to home. So I was wondering, where is the historical data on sea level rise for the Kapiti Coast in particular? And also, I would have thought there would have been something in here about our accreting coastline, so you could see those two together. So what part of the Kapiti Coast is accreting, and by how many centimetres a year, and then also I want to know what's happening with, because we're saying the sea level is rising, and yet there's nothing in here about the Kapiti Coast sea level. I find that quite sort of alarming. I guess I would like that information.
People around New Zealand have been going up by about 500 metres a year for quite a while. The global average is about 4. Well, the global average is more obvious. It's got less wobbles in it, if you like, smoother. And over the 30 years that we've had high precision satellite data that can measure sea level over a wide area, most of the ocean, we've seen that go from about 2.5 kilometres a year to now 4.5 kilometres a year. It's going up. That's due to the increasing in loss of ice sheet, and they end up in the ocean. And if the Greenland ice sheet goes, it's such a large shift in mass that changes the gravitational field and affects the sea level. And that sea level rises more in New Zealand as the Greenland ice sheet goes than it does in England. We're making a global problem now, right? So we have to learn to live with it.
No, what I'm saying is, where for the community, where is the historical data on sea level rise for the Kapiti Coast, and where's the information on our accreting coastline? Like, surely we'd be looking at accreting coastline.
Should we focus on that question? Yep.
I don't care what's happening globally, to be honest. I want to know what's happening on the Kapiti Coast, because this is about the Kapiti Coast. We're not making changes everywhere globally. I want to know what's happening here.
Well, the Ministry for Environment reports that we've been talking about, if you look at either of those, they have records of it, and they also talk at some of the satellite, the first one talks about satellite data as well. So, I mean, there's a lot of data. It goes back to 1900 for New Zealand, and another part of the world it goes back to the 1850s. So there's a lot of data.
Can we, I mean, is it possible to have that data? I think a lot of us would feel a lot better being able to see that information.
Yeah, I get the point you're making. So perhaps in our report we should bring that in.
Yes, so the sea level rising and the accretion coastline. I mean, I know it doesn't accrete all the way through, but
No, it's not. The major accretion is happening in the northern area and down to Waisana.
okay.
And it's coming down from the Raumati River and the Raumati River. We're getting, once we get past that peak there,
Yes.
then flows are different, totally different.
Right.
So that's your major accretion area is up north.
Right, so that will be in the report. I just think that that's important information for the community to have, regardless of whether it's up north
That'll
or
be
down south.
very early in this process. There was a meeting showed where the currents go and that stuff, so that will be on the website there somewhere. That should definitely be there somewhere. Yes.
And just on that point, all the meetings that we have the 5-hour meetings to discuss what the pathways are, they're all recorded, they're on the website. So you can see all that information. They're supposed to be there.
If you email me, I can email you back with a link to the website so you can access all that information.
Starting the minutes of the meeting.
Oh, right. Sure. But all that information is on it. So if you email me, I can send you the link to the website.
And that can be a historical sea rise on the Kapiti Coast.
I can't promise you what's on the website.
So if it's not there, is that something that can be provided to the community?
Okay, I'm just going to say, we are now almost 5 to 9, and I did say that we were going to run until 9 o'clock. Feels like we've got to this point without really breathing, which is kind of good stuff, but we probably need to start looking towards wrapping up. So maybe let's just have a couple more questions, and let's make them really, really good, solid, excellent questions, shall we? John, I'm sure you've got one. Right.
Hi, my name's John. I've been on the Kapiti Coast for about 15 years. I've lived in Raumati for 8 of those 15 years. Can you put that one up on a lady spoke about going back to the motorway. I agree, it's not quite to the motorway, but that map takes us back nearly to the motorway. My understanding is this is an extract from Jacob's report, and in that Jacob's report it talks about this being a water zone, I think is the best way I'll describe it, where water is likely to go to a certain point. Okay? I've discussed this and I've talked about it on a number of occasions about the seawall in Raumati. Raumati is what I would describe as a wet beach. A wet beach means that the tide comes in many times in a month and actually touches the sea wall. So the sea wall is intrinsic to the value and to the structure of the beach in Raumati. The map we're looking at is a map that was in the Jacobs report, and Derek Todd in July of 2022 answered a question for me and explained to me this map does not include a symbol, which means there could be a second map. If we put a map on the wall that did include the symbol, my question is, what would that map look like? And I suggest it would be very different indeed. I put this question to B, this team, and they very kindly have put that through to KCDC. KCDC have put it through to you, is my understanding. It's then got lost because I was told that a second map had been produced. I wrote to you via his team, KCDC, and I got a reply back to you through the same course saying you've heard of Lurch's map. So my question to you is, have you looked into what this map would look like if there was a seawall actually there? Because this map does not include a seawall, according to Derek Todd from a consultant company, which is.
Questions around whether this includes the Raumati CMP device or not.
This is just showing the area.
This is just a map.
It's not showing any detail of what's there or not. It's just showing the area.
This map isn't intended to do anything but give us areas 9A, 9B and 10A to deal with.
That's not true. That's a Jacobs map showing inundation of Raumati.
9B is the inundation area.
Yes, which goes back to the
And I'm asking what that map would look like.
The question
If that's it.
If there was a seawall,
Yes.
would there be inundation in 9B?
Would the map be different? That's the question I'm asking. How different would it be? Well, I'm asking the question.
Yeah.
I've been asking this question for 2 years. There's a map. There's not a map. Okay.
So John, can I just get you to sit back a little bit? Give us some space. So I did have this conversation with one of the senior staff members at council, so I'll just relay restate that so that everybody says the same information. What he told me is that when they looked at the assessments, they looked at it with a seawall, but then they have to look at the scenarios of what if in 30, 40, 50 years' time a new council decides not to replenish the seawall? And they have to look at that as a possibility. So that was what they told me as being, so they have to look at that worst case scenario. So I'm just passing on that information, not saying whether it's good information or strong.
I'll repeat what I said. Derek Todd, Jacobs Consulting, in a meeting July 2022 in Paraparaumu, answering a question to me, told me this map, or the map in the Jacobs report, did not include a seawall. That's fudging what you're being told there. And I'm sorry, but it's not true.
As a scenario.
Yeah.
Right. So nothing sort of more to add to it at this stage. Yeah.
What else do you think we don't know?
You're missing that. All right. So we're going to take one more question. Okay. All right. I have one. No. On you? Yeah. Okay. This is simple. Let's make it a question.
This is a nice question. This is about triggers. Triggers start this week, and then shortly after, when we're going to get your heads together to put the triggers together. Will the triggers be different for each north, south, east, and west? They would be different. In the example we used in the flyer, we used an example that said, if the beach gets wet at high tide, that may be a trigger. I implore you to not use that around that thing.
Because it gets me anyway. It's your own. Nice way to segue back to the beginning of the statement. All right, Tony, looks like you're going to get the last question of the night. Why not? Okay.
So I just wanted to really ask you a question. Have you ever thought about maybe sending out an email, because you've got access, I guess, to council's rates, or not you personally, but council do. Maybe you could send out an email to everybody who is impacted in the Kapiti area, letting them know what you're doing, because I'm sure the people in the northern area, because 1,100 people have already been designated for managed retreat, which probably a lot don't know, and the people who are designated for managed retreat don't know that either. I was just wondering whether you could use that method to actually speak to the people who are affected by that. Also, question number 2, why has Jacobs used the broom rule? It's an inundation model and not a process-based shoreline model.
The question was to do with why can't you send an email. I will just get a little bit of feed, because this is again a conversation I've had with senior people at council. Even us as a community board, we can't go to council and say we've got an email for people in Raumati, we can send it through the database. The reason is because under the Privacy Act they can obtain information only for a set purpose. And so what they tell me, again, is they haven't necessarily identified that getting an email from a Raumati Community Board is the purpose for which they've collected your email address. Therefore, they may not be compliant with the Privacy Act if they does that make sense? Right?
Could you not send an email first asking people?
No, because that itself is breaching what you're trying to protect yourself from. So the only way that I can send you an email from the community board is if you give me your email address directly or if you email me. Okay? But if I had come to a meeting, set up a meeting like this and say, give us your email address, you go, no way, it's state police, we don't want you to have my email, my details, right? So I can't email them. But I can tell you because I've got the emails.
There must be a way of CAP being able to let the public know when a meeting is on, because it's so hit and miss. Not everyone gets papers, and if you don't know
The CAP panel meetings themselves aren't public meetings, are they? No. So those meetings are.
these ones with the community.
So that's run by us, and any failure of communications is on me as the chief.
Yeah, and if they hold their own meeting, and surely word could get out to people personally. I mean, council has a very good way of contacting people when they want rates to be paid. So surely they can let people know what's happening. It's so huge.
There is, I mean, it's hard, as I've sort of said this before in some of our meetings, there are more channels now that we can reach people through, but that's made it harder, not easier. It's one of the real difficulties that we have. You know, we put a thing on Facebook. What about us who don't look on Facebook? Okay, it's in the newspaper. We don't read the newspaper. Okay, we do a mail drop. Oh, but half of them don't get delivered because nobody delivers them anymore. Right? And so every option falls down. It's really difficult. And I've learned how difficult it is now that I'm in this position too.
And the council knows who all the ratepayers are, so surely they can let people know.
Apparently not, because of restrictions around the Privacy Act.
And the renters, a lot of people rent.
Yeah, that's true. So a lot of people are renting, so their names aren't on for the rates purposes.
I've just got some good news.
Are you going to have last? Alright, before you do that, so we finished questions. Come on, Jill.
This is good news. My property that fell down on the sea, well, my grandmother's, in 1976 has not moved 1 inch since then. And I've seen walls up to about there on there. So there you go. So just to cheer you up a bit.
Thank you. Nice bit of positive. So, okay, so we'll end it there. I'm not sure how much of that was useful in terms of informing CAP about the pathways, but it was nonetheless a useful conversation. Some of you, it's the first time you've really had this chance. If you want to feedback in, there's some bits of paper up on the wall here with markers. By all means, and I see some people have put down questions to be asked. We also commissioned an artist to draw out the pathway, the whole process for this. And that's on the wall if you want to look at it. There's also, some of you may be aware, there's this long-term vision for Raumati going on, that's been going for about a year. Feel free to feed back into that project as well. So there's other ways. I'm Ben Larissy. I have been a resident in Raumati South for 15 years. I have 2 retail stores in Raumati Beach, so believe me, I'm very concerned about this sort of issue myself. You can contact me anytime about anything. I say that with trepidation. Let's keep it reasonable and to reasonable times of the day and night. By all means, contact me if you want more information, if you want this presentation shared. I'm happy to pass it on to you once it comes to me, that kind of thing. Now next Tuesday, 19th of March, I know Karl have a meeting about the CAP process. We also have a Raumati Community Board meeting on that night at Takutai Kapiti. We have just got the agenda today, and there is a statement there about CAP doing a bit of a presentation. We're just trying to identify what that will actually do. But what we are also getting, some of you may be interested in, is a presentation from staff about the Raumati Seawall. Okay, so that work that's kind of programmed to start, we'll get an update about what that means. So, John, I'm hoping to see you here differently. Okay, for that update. Okay, so before we finish, thank you so much to CAP panel members for just coming out here first of all. Really appreciate the sometimes that stuff feels a little bit pointy, but some of that stuff the community always feels a bit better for having that opportunity to have those conversations. So really from the bottom of my heart, thank you for doing this. I take it as a sign of respect for the community that I represent, and I hope that other people do as well. Hope to see you all tomorrow night at KCU Club Rooms in Wicker Park, where the purpose, the aim, is to talk about the pathways north of the stream. We might just try and get a little bit better focus on those pathways tomorrow night than what we had tonight. Hopefully tonight we've got out some of the kind of rough stuff. So hope to see you there, same time tomorrow. Spend a bit of time feedbacking on those things. Talk to us, some of our councillors and community board members. See you tomorrow night. Cheers.